Has everybody had a chance to write this part down yet? Okay. I don't know why math books do this, but a lot of times when they write out a definition or the words, they write it in such a way that when you're reading it, after you get done reading it, you have more questions than you would answers anyway. Okay? It says congruent polygons have congruent corresponding parts. They're matching sides and angles. When you name congruent polygons, you must list corresponding vertices in the same order. So they use a bunch of other math words in there. It might get confusing. Here's what's important to know. That if they tell you two polygons are congruent, that the order that they've given it to you in had to have lined up. So, AB, segment AB, had to be congruent to EF. Notice AB were the first two, EF was the first two. Does everybody see that? So they're saying AB is lined up with EF in the picture. BC, the second two, segment BC, is congruent to segment FG, which is the second two in the list. Likewise, CD, the last two that are in the list, congruent to segment GH, the last two. And then they went on the outside. Segment DA is congruent to segment HE. So they've listed all the corresponding sides and all the corresponding angles that are in those two figures. Angle A is in the same place as angle E. Angle B is in the same place as angle F. Angle C is in the same place as G, and D is in the same place as H. At this point, if you want to state that two polygons are congruent, you have to be able to show that all the sides and all the angles are lined up and congruent. If we don't know that, then I can't state that the two would be congruent. If they give me that two polygons are congruent, then I can list all of their corresponding sides and angles as being congruent. Everybody good? So, again, write this statement down. You do not need the picture. We're going to do this one together. I'm going to have you do the second one here on your own. So all you need to write down is HIJK is congruent to LMNO. And we are going to list the corresponding sides. And we're also going to list the corresponding angles. Notation is important. Make sure that when you're listing the sides, that you're referring to them as segments. Segment HI is congruent to segment LM. Notice I took the first two and it lined up with the first two in the other one. Segment IJ is congruent to MN. That would be the second two lined up with the second two. Segment JK is congruent to NO. That'd be the last two lined up with the last two. And the last pair of sides would be segment HK, which would be congruent to LO, the outside 2 and the outside 2. Now, also remember that HI, you could have listed it as IH. If the order of these two that are in this segment don't matter, so my answer and your answer might occasionally look different, but if they give it to you in an order, I kind of recommend that you keep it in the order that they've given it to you in. Likewise, when you go to list the angles, it would be important to put the angle symbol there. The angle symbol almost looks like one of the greater than, less than symbols. Angle H then would be congruent to angle L. Angle I would be congruent to angle M. Angle J congruent to angle N. And last but not least, angle K is congruent to angle O. Questions? When I go to list the angles, again, the angle symbol is important. Angle W is congruent to angle M. Angle Y is congruent to angle K. Angle S is congruent to angle V. Questions about how to list the corresponding sides as being congruent and the corresponding angles. Okay, this is another time where I would say don't write out the words, but write out this part. Okay? Skip writing the words. You can write third angle theorem above it. This is out of page 220 out of your book. But draw the two little pictures this time. Right? Angle A is congruent to angle D. Angle B is congruent to angle E. If this is true, then this is also true. And we're going to talk about why it's true in just a second. Third angle theorem actually says if two angles of one triangle, A and B, one triangle, are congruent to two angles of another of another triangle, D and E. So A is congruent to D, B is congruent to E, and you can see they've marked that in this picture. If that's the case, then C would have to be congruent to F. And sometimes if we put numeric values, this is easier to see. So let's say A was 80 degrees. How big would that make D? 80 degrees. It'd have to be because we said they were congruent. Let's say B was 40 degrees. How big would angle E be? 40 degrees. We said there's 180 degrees in a triangle, the Triangle Sum Theorem. So if I've got 80 here and 40 here, I've used up 120 degrees. It means that this angle has to be 60. Well, since the same two numbers are over here, this one would also have to be what? So if they tell you two angles are congruent, you can state that the third angle is also what? Congruent. They don't have to give you all three to get the third one. They only have to give you two of them. That makes sense? Okay. So, I want you to go ahead and write all of this down. The given, the prove, and draw the little picture. Draw the picture just like you see it with the marks that are in it. Doesn't have to be super accurate. Okay. Remember that when we go to do a proof, we're going to do our proofs in this 2-column form. And on one side, we're going to have our statements. On the other side, we're going to have our reasons. This is the process. This is why we could follow that process. Remember that on the reason side, we can have theorems, postulates, definitions, properties, things that we already know are true. On the statement side, we're going to put that pieces down to get to this last statement. What is the group of statements usually that we do first? The stuff that they what? That they give us. So my reason is going to be given, and I'm going to go ahead and list everything that was given to me. Angle A is congruent to angle D. Segment AE is congruent to segment DC. Segment EB is congruent to segment CB. Segment BA is congruent to segment BD. At this point, the only way that I can state that these two triangles are congruent, and please don't put it right here, I'm going to slide all the way down here. There's going to be a couple more steps in between. The only way that I can state that these two triangles are congruent would be to state that all of their corresponding parts are congruent. Do I know that all the corresponding parts are congruent yet? No. In fact, what am I missing? I have 3 sets of sides, but I only have 1 set of angles. Look at the picture. Is there a pair of angles that you can state are congruent based on the information from the picture? Courtney. Okay. Okay, you're saying angle B, be careful. How many angles are at B? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So, be careful when there's more than one angle. Remember that you have to list it with 3 points. So angle ABE is congruent to what angle? ABE is going to be congruent to CBD. Can you tell me why? Vertical angles. Somebody said it. Very good. Vertical angles are congruent. I now have 3 sets of sides. I still only have 2 pairs of angles. I'm missing this set. Angle E needs to be congruent to angle C. Why can I make that statement? Very good. The third angle theorem. If 2 angles of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of the other triangle, then the third angle also has to be congruent. Please be careful in this space. I can't even begin to tell you how many times people write the word prove or given in that last space. Just because it's what they asked me to prove and they gave me the statement, so to speak, they gave me what I was going to be looking for, does not mean that I can use it as a reason over here. They're asking me to prove it. Remember that on this side it needs to be some kind of definition, theorem, postulate, or something that I already know is true. They asked me to prove that this was true. They gave me that these were true. They asked me to prove this was true, and I had to back it up with a reason. All the corresponding parts are congruent. Only way I can prove them congruent at this point in time. Everybody okay with this one? Okay. You don't need to write this down. We're just going to step through it. Okay? Don't need to write it down. A lot of your problems are like this tonight. They give you a congruent statement, and they ask me to complete the other congruent statements. What is segment LC congruent to? I could say KB or I could say BK. Either would be okay. What is KJ congruent to? KJ. The last two would be what? CM or MC. JB. ML. Angle L. Angle B. Angle K. Angle C. Angle M. Angle J. What if they said the triangle CML? CML. What would this one have to be? KJB. Make sure that whatever C was corresponding with, it's still corresponding with in that congruent statement. KBJ would be triangle CLM. Everybody okay with the concept that's here? Okay.